Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. My name is Jennifer Dale. I'm Vice President of Recruiting for Gray Television. I'm super excited to talk with you tonight about some of one of my favorite things in journalism, which is investigative reporting and public records. Joining us tonight is Thomas Gruel. Thomas is our Assistant News Director at Live 5 News in Charleston, which is our Gray station here, and Stephen Cruz, one of our talent acquisition specialists, is living the glamorous life of a recruiter, coming to us from a hotel room in Miami. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Stephen's going to monitor the chat while Thomas and I walk through some of the stuff about investigative reporting. And we're super excited to talk about this. And what we're aiming for tonight is a conversation about how to use public records in your reporting for young reporters, maybe who maybe don't have a background in investigative reporting and who are just moving in and interested in doing more document-based reporting. So we're going to get started. And, first we're going to start off by talking about what is an investigative reporter. Hey, Thomas, I know
Yes,
the answer
ma'am.
to this, but did you ever work as an actual reporter?
I did not. Reporter was never in my job title.
It was never in my job title either, even though in college I was pretty certain that that was the route that I was going to take. I just knew it. And although I haven't been an investigative reporter, I've spent most of the last 10 years on investigative journalism because we should all be journalists. And if you want to work in this business, you should consider yourself a reporter. An investigative reporter is just a really good reporter that takes their story one step farther than probably your competition is willing to go. If you've worked with me for 2 minutes, anyone on this chat who's worked with me for 2 minutes probably knows that I love this comparison. When everyone is many times we're all going to be serving up the same story. And when everyone is serving up that hamburger, an investigative reporter serves up what, Thomas? What does an
Serves
investigative
serves up a Big Mac.
Exactly. So, we're going to make sure that we're taking one step forward to serve those viewers. In the interest of full disclosure, Thomas and I have worked together for a long time. When I first met Thomas, he was a producer at Live 5 when I was a new news director in my second news director job there. So the whole hamburger to Big Mac theory is something that I've probably forced down his throat many times over the last few years. And again, it's a life-changing or a journalism-changing prospect when you do it. So these are the 5 public records we're going to talk about tonight: check registers, insurance payouts, personnel files, contracts, and police training records. Thomas, you go first. What's your favorite FOIA on this list?
There's some good ones. My favorite's got to be personnel files, though.
Why personnel files?
I think personnel it allows you to dive so much deeper into your reporting, no matter what you're looking at, whether it's someone from a police department, a city board, a school board, anything like that. You're going to be able to find so much more about them and dig deeper than what might be presented at a news conference or in a press release. It's going to allow you to understand what they may have done or not done in their background, and allow you to take that information and further your reporting.
Actually, I probably would have picked that as my favorite public record on this list as well. But since Thomas chose that one, I'm going to go with insurance payouts because you'll see why. It's all stories about all ways that counties are being charged or losing a taxpayer money. All these payouts are, and we'll go over those in a bit and some of the stories that come from them. So let's start with check registers and credit card statements. So a lot of people may be like, okay, I'm not quite sure what a check register is. I know that these days I write maybe 3 checks a year. I pay for everything electronically. But if you have a bank account, you have a check register, because it's basically a record of spending from your bank account. and it's just called check registers these days. So you can get these from any public agency or school system, a public record, and they're usually available monthly. So here's a screenshot of what a check register looks like from the city of Charleston. I pulled this off their website. They put them up monthly, which is actually a pretty cool thing that a lot of places don't do. But when I got here and arrived in Charleston, they were doing PDFs. I asked if they would switch over to Excel so they would be sortable. And not only did they do that, it appears, even though I've been gone from Live 5 almost 2 years, they're still doing it. Um, so that's a win for transparency for sure from the city of Charleston. So you're looking at this. What are you looking at in a check register? On the left, you have your vendor, basically who they're writing the check or giving the money to, a short description, the dates, and the amounts. And you may ask yourself, why do I care that they spent $29,000 on Cigna, which I know is, insurance? Or why do I care about, this all looks pretty routine, athletic uniforms for, some group, parking lot repairs. Why do I really care? Do I need to know this information? Well, you know what? Sometimes you may find things that surprise you, such as this. Thomas, do you remember the story of the
I do.
$300,000 crime-fighting toilet?
I remember it very well, and it came from a check register. We had found that the city was spending nearly $300,000 on restrooms in a county park, which we thought was very, very expensive. It turns out it was very expensive for one restroom, one single restroom that they were doing, and their goal with it was to help fight crime. It had UV lights in it. You can see in the picture that it wasn't completely closed in. So their goal was to help fight crime and to keep drugs and other things out of that. And you see in the headline it mentions you paid for it. Something to keep in mind with check registers is it's our tax dollar money. That if you do anything like if you work, if you do anything like you pay taxes, you are paying for this $300,000 crime fighting toilet. So obviously we don't have the video for this one. This one was a ways back.
It was a good story.
It was a great story. It was a great story.
But it has been a minute. This was one. It's very memorable. It's probably one of the most memorable check register stories that I could think of. But it's in 2019. So hopefully, and put Thomas on the spot, I wonder if it cut down on crime. It's been probably 5 years. In fact, it's been 5 years day after tomorrow.
It's been almost exactly 5 years. That might be a perfect 5-year follow-up story.
I guess I know what some soul at Live 5 is going to be doing the day after tomorrow. In fact, I think we might. Let's see. I don't know if we have anybody from Live 5 on here, but if you do, here's your pitch. But good luck finding the video from 2019 because we tried.
That's very true. But something to keep in mind too with check registers, and like Jennifer mentioned, they're readily available on websites. So a lot of things we'll talk about with FOIA, you have to submit a FOIA and you have to wait typically for a response, and then 10 days for them to acknowledge it, and then 30 days oftentimes to get the document you're looking for. Oftentimes with direct registers, if you dig into a public entity's website, they're readily available. It's not something you have to wait that length of time, so you can get started on it right away.
If you're lucky. And I have another clip that we'll show from a little bit more serious check register story that stemmed from one day that I was just looking through Charleston County records and through a Charleston County school system records, a check register. And I thought, well, this sure is strange. They're spending, this appears to be like $20,000 at a local hotel. So we're going to play the first few seconds. We won't watch the whole thing of this, but you'll get the idea.
Hotel rooms overlooking the water and walks on the beach. It sounds like a great vacation, but it's a 3-day getaway, all part of a Charleston County Schools project your tax dollars helped pay for.
We got the opportunity to really spend that quality time together.
Vanessa Brown is the principal at Baptist Hill Middle High School and is one of 30 local people selected to be part of the Shared Future project. The goal was to reimagine what CCSD will look like in 2035.
We had to create a cocoon, a safe environment. And sitting in a boardroom or school library or Anywhere that may have been free of charge wouldn't work.
Vanessa explains the first few days were all about getting to know the other team members.
It had to be a safe place where that person and I could go, take a walk, and talk.
I noticed Tides Hotel charges in CCSD's check registers. The cost? About $25,000.
So you get the idea with that one. You'll see things and you'll think, this is kind of interesting. I don't know that this is right. And that was a long story, so we're not going to go all the way through it. But that one check register charge led to a different one, which, if I remember correctly, ended up being a pretty expensive project just outside of that $20,000 that $20,000 expense for a hotel on the beach that was, like, how far away you think from Charleston, Thomas? 20 minutes?
It's not, I mean, from the actual like city, our headquarters, like 20 minutes, 15 minutes, if that.
Yeah. I like, but at a free space just wouldn't work. Whatever. So, we're going to move on to the next public record, which is, again, one of my favorite public records, because, again, you take a look at how an agency is spending your money, and you may tell yourself, hey, I know we have a lot of college students on here. Am I really a taxpayer? I don't own a house. I don't work here. Well, you go to the store and buy something, then you're probably paying sales tax. So yes, this is your money, and you should care about how it's going. So this is, and again, these records should be available in any state. Different states have different laws. So what we're looking at is South Carolina, but I know for a fact that, like, in Tennessee, for example, you can also get these payouts. It may be called something a little bit different than South Carolina calls it, like an insurance reserve fund. But still, you can see how the money is, a public agency is settling money. So, Thomas, I know you live in this insurance reserve fund world still every day. Why don't you talk a little bit about what we're seeing?
Sure. So you see the different columns in this particular document. You see the cause of claim. So that's kind of cluing you in on what happened. You see, obviously, like a nursing error, a diagnosis, surgical, different things that are coming out of these claims. Kind of as you go across, you'll see the date of the incident. That's going to clue you in, obviously, on when the alleged incident happened, the date reported, and then the date closed. And then the claimant and claimant attorney is going to be really important. That's who sued whatever agency is involved. And then paid losses is how much they got paid out from this insurance reserve fund. And then the civil action number, as you can go over, that's kind of the code when you're trying to find that particular lawsuit. So for instance, if you're looking at this nursing error, the third one down, looks like it happened in 2014. And it was closed out in 2023. It was a $475,000 payout from MUSC here in Charleston. So for us, we can look at that. We know that there was some lawsuit involving someone. They were paid out nearly $500,000. So you can look and see under civil action, it gives that code. We can go into our public index and we can find that particular lawsuit. And that's going to clue us in on exactly what they claimed happened. And then obviously they got paid out that amount of money. And that can lead into an investigative story.
And truly, also, some of these can be stories that you can do fairly quickly. We're going to watch a story in just a minute of a reporter at Live 5 who, actually, it's not a reporter. She's a morning anchor, and she comes in at 3:30 in the morning, and she's on the air until 7. But she has responsibilities of, like, everyone who's in a newsroom. There's no one who should be reading a prompter, and that being the sum total of their job, so to speak. That should not be what any journalist brings to the table, is the ability to read someone else's work. So this is a way that if you don't have a ton of time, that you can still turn some stories, some things. When I was a producer, I used to get asked all the time, how long can I have for this story? And the correct answer is long as it is good. Some stories are better short, some are better long. So we're going to take a look at one that was done as a day turn, and pay attention. We're going to play a game at the end of it. Tell me how many public records you can spot in this story that we're going to show. All right. Hold up. Let's see if it goes. Oops, I removed it.
The state's insurance reserve fund has shelled out $600,000 to the estate of Rashad Smith. After Smith's death, his mother sued the Berkeley County Sheriff's Office alleging excessive force, unlawful search and entry, and wrongful death.
Hands behind your back! Move the taser. Move the taser. Watch out. Put your hands behind your back! Roll over! Roll over!
Smith was arrested by BCSO in 2018 following a report that he was abusing his 19-month-old son. But the report of an emergency to get a response to a location. It goes on to allege that Smith and his son were asleep in their home when deputies stormed inside and punched, choked, tased, and hit Smith with a baton. According to Smith's estate, that interaction left Smith with long-term dizziness, headaches, and seizures, leading to his death in 2020. At the time of the arrest, Sheriff Dwayne Lewis said that there was an active warrant for Smith's arrest for unpaid child support. As for the 7 BCSO deputies involved, an internal affairs report we got through a Freedom of Information Act request concluded that they did not act with excessive force. We have confirmed 2 of those deputies are still employed with the Sheriff's Office. Now, we reached out to the Berkeley County Sheriff's Office for comment about this $600,000 payout. A rep tells us they didn't even know about the settlement until that moment. They directed us to their lawyer, who said the office does not have comment at this time. In the newsroom, Shelby Roberts, Live 5 News.
All right, a couple of things about that one. So there's a lot of public records in that, minute and a half. Any guess in the chat about how many different public records went into that story? All right, we've got a 10. Okay, let's see if we can name them. One of them is the one we're talking that probably sparked it. That's the IRF. All right, what else did you see, Thomas?
The video, the body cam video, was requested through public records or
Yep.
obtained.
Always think about the fact that, a public record isn't always a document. Sometimes your public records can be video. It can be an audio recording. It can be, a picture. Yeah. So, so that was one. That was 2. The lawsuit itself, that would have been number 3. You would obtain that from the court. And then the last one I saw was
the internal affairs report. And obviously, so anytime there's an investigation with an agency, if they're, we're conducting an internal investigation, you hear that a lot, whether it's some sort of incident, officer shooting, anything like that.
Okay, I don't know. Did we lose Thomas? Stephen, can you hear him, or is it?
I can hear him. I think it's on your end, Jen.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Well, if it messes up with me, just keep somebody else pick up and start talking. And when I'm back, I'll keep going. But yeah. So and again, I apologize for this if we missed some. But 4, that's what I saw. So let's put the story back in and or the slide back in. All right. So the quick way to do it is cross-reference a lawsuit, check for a file or public records or video, and get an interview with the family. Sometimes they turn into deeper stories. I know that we had one that I remember from my time at Live 5 where a man was running from police, and he ended up getting hurt while running from police, sued police, and there was a settlement. Like, that was a story I think we promoted for a while. So it turned into a much larger story. So, again, think of what you have. Not every story has to be a 7-minute investigation. Not every investigation needs that long to tell. Some of them may be a minute. Remember, keep your stories as long as it is good. All right. The next one is Thomas's favorite FOIA. Personnel files. And again, every public employee has a personnel file. I know that sometimes these can be tricky in other states. In South Carolina, personnel files are public record after like some identifying information may be taken out, like, social security numbers and such. But the personnel file itself, like what you'll usually find is application data for jobs they've applied for. Disciplinary notices, if there's one in there, performance reviews, training documents. If there's stuff about administrative leave, that's actually a letter found in that we pulled from a personnel file in the Charleston County School District. So like, and that's an administrative leave, which means you're not doing your job. Administrative leave, you're still getting paid for it. And so probably the most interesting thing I've ever seen, the biggest story that ever came out of public records in my experience, in my career that I've done, is the one we're about to see. And this one is long, but I think you'll see why it's worth watching.
You have no idea the inner turmoil that I have suffered. You have no idea.
In order to protect this mother and her child's identity, we can't show you her face, but she's remembering when her child told her about being molested at school.
What went through your mind when your child said that?
Shock, disgust, lots of anger, but concern for my child. That's a lot to put on a child.
Police reports show 2 assaults happened at Dunston Elementary in North Charleston in 2015. The children came forward the next year.
Charleston County school employees facing charges.
In January 2016, Marvin Gathers, a parent advocate working for the school, was arrested for having child pornography on his district-issued laptop.
I am absolutely stunned and shocked and scared. My son went to the Stingrays game with him Sunday. He brought my son home.
Then, over the next few days, 2 different children came forward telling police Gathers touched them inappropriately at school the year before. One also said he took nude pictures of him in the school bathroom. Gathers was rearrested and charged with those crimes, too. But I found out that the district first discovered the child pornography on Marvin Gathers' laptop 2 years earlier, in 2014. The victim's mother had no idea.
As far as I know, after it was discovered, it was immediate arrest. There was no coming back from that. Actually, it didn't come to light until the arrest.
No, ma'am. The school district knew in 2014 with the computer, and he was listed as a suspect on the police file 2 years before he was arrested.
I was not aware of that. I was not aware of that at all. Like that? Wow.
According to an affidavit in January 2014, a CCSD IT specialist was performing a routine virus scan on Marvin Gathers' district-issued laptop and observed that pornographic websites had been accessed, including websites featuring child pornography. Police say the laptop was secured and 37 days later turned over to police, who sent it for a forensic analysis. That analysis took nearly 2 years, and in the meantime, our investigation shows Gathers was still working at the elementary school. It was during that time he allegedly molested the 2 children.
My child would have been safe. This whole situation could have been avoided. That's horrible. That is very, very horrible.
We also got a copy of the police detective's file where 2 witnesses said after the pornography was first found in 2014, Gathers was sent home at first, but it's unclear for how long. The principal wrote he was back after a week. A police officer said it was after a month. Gathers himself wrote this letter to the district after his computer was seized, begging for a second chance and apologizing for what he said was only adult material. But the district originally got police involved because they found child pornography. Gathers was allowed back to work.
Should he have been placed on leave or fired immediately?
In retrospect, probably so.
School board member Michael Miller doesn't remember this case coming before the board in 2014, but has concerns with how it was handled.
To secure student safety first, even if it is an allegation, I think immediate suspension is warranted, in my opinion.
Do you agree that most parents would expect that?
I would think so. I'm a parent of a 5th grader. That's something that I would expect as well. And maybe we need to tighten this policy.
After 4 months of waiting on a public records request from CCSD, we got a copy of Marvin Gether's personnel, dated October 2014. He was promoted from being a student concern specialist to a parent advocate at Dunston, making $55,000 a year. The district was extremely pleased to extend this offer, again 10 months after the porn was found. Fast forward to 2016, that forensic report on the computer came back and Gethers was arrested and fired.
Marvin, give us his side of the story. He pled not guilty in court, but the coroner tells us he died of heart failure before the case went to trial, so he was never convicted. His attorneys do tell us they were prepared to defend these charges and clear his name before he died.
Superintendent Jarita Postlethwaite was not the head of the district at that time, but says she would have handled it differently.
My practice is to immediately place someone on administrative leave when pornography on a computer or in any other form is involved. I can't speak to what someone else might or might not have done. It boggles the mind to think that that would not have happened.
CCSD says they can't tell us who made the decision 4 years ago to let Gethers keep working while he was under investigation. They said in a statement the district administrators who managed this incident are no longer employed with CCSD. There's no other information that would provide an explanation to your questions.
Words can't even describe the moral decay. If you don't do anything else, take your child's side.
When people are involved, when children are involved, we don't have 2 times to get it right. And if we didn't get it right the first time, we have to own that. We have to own that. Our system has to own that.
That is easily one of the biggest stories I think in my career I have ever been a part of. And good luck if you were trying to count the number of public records involved in that story. But if I remember correctly, the thing that started it all was a payout for a settlement that we were trying to see what they did. And then the personnel record, and after the personnel record, when we found that, there was, paperwork in there showing that they had found child pornography in there 2 years before he was arrested. It just one thing led to another, and ended up with several children coming forward who previously hadn't been. And that was a story that easily lasted years and recently just wrapped up, right, Thomas?
Yeah, I think within the last 8 or 9 months, there was a final settlement for the families. And kind of to Jennifer's point, I mean, the public records started, back in when that story first aired and continued until, with new lawsuits and new things filed. And Carter Coyle was the investigative reporter at the time that did that story. Her story led to those other children coming forward. So not only from an investigative side of thing, but you hear a lot too of why do we do what we do? And I think that's one of those reasons. That investigative story, those documents led these families and these children to find some sort of justice in what had happened to them.
And it meant that I remember the night that aired being in the newsroom when a parent called and said, oh my goodness, I need to find someone to talk to, and led to those children who, the parents that they didn't realize had been victimized getting help and getting treatment. It wasn't just about the lawsuit that resulted in that really big settlement. But it's just a really, if you really want to feel like you're helping someone in my world, there's like that's where I've always found a very deep sense of purpose as a journalist. And again, that's a public record. He was a public employee. So we could have access to that. So again, and you got to think about what your public agencies are, your school systems, your counties, your cities, anything that kind of touches the government. You can, what they create is public records at so many different levels. So another one that we can talk about is contracts. Think about it. Superintendents and coaches and companies. Oh my. A contract, we've got many young journalists on here, reporters, producers. Chances are you're going to have a contract. The same thing that's interesting in a contract that we report on are probably the things you need to keep a really good eye on in your own personal contract. I always tell people anything with numbers, start dates, end dates, salary dates, what it's going to cost you if you break it, what it's going to cost somebody else if they do. So whenever, always it was a good rule of thumb, whenever I was news director, is if a new superintendent is hired, if a new coach is hired, if a new city manager is hired, all of those things are things that you want to make sure you get a contract with. And then, Thomas, you guys just did a very interesting story recently about a contract between a politician and in a city.
Oh, we did. So former President Trump visited Dorchester County in our area, I believe last September or October. So when that happened, we requested a contract between the venue that hosted him and his campaign. And that led to a story of the fact that the county was never paid what was in that contract. I want to say it was something like $27,000 or something like that for event. And that led to an investigative story of why the county was never paid, who's responsible, are taxpayers now on the hook, led to all of that. And to this day, we believe that the county still has not been paid, which then leads to other stories of, are there other events from other politicians where there are contracts in hand and money's not being paid? So that came directly from that contract, from that event.
I mean, lots of different ways, lots of contracts. There's lots of different things that you can use in different public records.
And think about too, kind of along the same lines of that, a lot of times we think contracts of like Jennifer mentioned, with superintendent or with employees, but think about any events, or if you have a sports team in your market or a town, a lot of times if it's a minor league team, there's a contract they have with the venue they're playing at. You can see how much money they're paying. Are they potentially losing money as a team because of the amount of money they're having to pay? So it's not just the people, it's contracts with venues and with buildings and concerts, anything like that. There could be a contract readily available.
So Jennifer, Thomas, we've got a question, and this is one of those questions that we deal with a lot in this business, and it's, how do you deal with PIOs after a tough or tension-filled story that might have stemmed from a FOIA?
Well, I've done that. Wow, how many times? So here's what I always say to reporters. When you come to work and when we're working together, I want us to be friendly. I want us to be professional. I want us to, hold ourselves to a high standard, a higher standard than we're going to hold the people that we report on to. And as friendly as you may be, and as much as you may have to work together with your PIO, you're not friends. You have a job to do. People are counting on you. The viewer is counting on you to be the voice for someone who doesn't have one. And if you are more concerned about that than you are serving the public, then you probably are in the long run of work. However, again, we're going to have, many times we're going to have to agree to disagree. There very well could be some PIOs on here, some of which I've probably sent FOIAs to. I've had PIOs call me up and say, I don't like the tone of that request. And I'm like, I didn't realize public records have a tone. But at the end of the day, always remember what you're requesting doesn't belong to them. And anyone who fills your public records request isn't doing you a favor. They're doing the job you, the taxpayer, are paying them for. Thomas, as someone who probably has answered a very frustrated phone call from a PIO, probably more recently than, the recruiter has. What sort of advice do you have?
I would say too, in keeping it, the biggest thing I would say is not to take anything personally. kind of along what Jennifer said, everyone has a job to do. You as a journalist has a job to do. The public information officer has a job to do for their agency as well. So, kind of from a bird's eye view, nothing is personal in this business at all. And keeping that in mind is going to help you move forward. And you can, not that it's going to change anything, but you can have like a courtesy if you're working on a story that came from a FOIA, give the PIO a heads up. Hey, that story that I was working on is running tonight. It's always best maybe not to catch them off guard. It's not going to change anything about the story. It's not going to, do anything to affect the story, but it's just that common courtesy of, hey, that story that we were working through and mentioned you about, it's airing at 6 o'clock tonight. Getting ahead of it that way is never a bad idea. But to Jennifer's point, keep in mind that you're doing a job. You are doing a job. The PIO is doing a job. But as a taxpayer, yourself and you're giving a voice to the voiceless. You're giving a voice to those taxpayers that don't have an opportunity to dive into this the way that you do. So just keeping that friendly conversation going with the PIO. Always be professional. Always kind of stay above the board. Stay in a way that's nobody's going to question you. I think is very, very important. Make sure you're doing your job professionally and having courtesy with everyone you deal with, and then everyone moves on.
And, as a follow-up to that, jumping ahead into Steven's job, I saw a question that I wanted to answer. He says that I'm terrible at this, and he's right. If that relationship is stressed, though, does it endanger station reporter access? Filling my public records request is the law. Thomas, do you ever remember any of our investigative stories stopping people from giving us information about future crimes, about future things happening in a school district?
Never did.
Nope, because that's their job. And if someone tries to do that, people like me would call and say, you know what? You have to give this to us. Like, what do you mean? I had lots of questions like, well, if I do this story on the police department, what if they don't give us information in the future? Are they not going to tell you about a crime? Because that comes from a police report. That's their job. So just think about that again. Be friendly, be nice. But I have never, I've had people threaten to never do an interview with my station again, both at Live 5 and at when I was at WJHL in Johnson City, and shoot, even at WMBF in Myrtle Beach. But at the end of the day, that's their job. You're a public information officer. It's time to answer for the public.
Keep in mind too. I was going to say, keep in mind too. If you're doing your job with this information, as long as your story is factual, as long as your story gives both sides, if there's two sides to it, as long as you give both sides the opportunity to respond, you are doing your job. A PIO oftentimes, and it's their job is to make their agency, appear the best that they can be. Sometimes public records may get in the way of that, and it's our job to report on what those public records say. We're not attacking anyone. We're not going after anyone. I mean, obviously, with the Charleston County School District story with Marvin Gathers, you guys to watch. Obviously, as you can imagine, CCSD was not thrilled with that story, but there was nothing, factually wrong with that story. It was a very powerful story that had documents to back up every single thing that was said.
And also, too, like, again, for any of our young MMJs, before you embark on any of these stories, talk with your news director. Heavily, as we would say, lawyered.
So Jennifer and Thomas, when April or May of 2020, when COVID hit and everything was shut down, we had a bunch of gyms that were forced to shut down. And we caught several of them violating the rules and did stories on those gyms violating the rules. Flip around to November of 2020 or December of 2020, when they were holding their toy drives, they were mad at us for about 6 months until they needed us for a story on their toy drive that they were having. So they need us just as much as we need them in these situations.
It's a mutually beneficial relationship. And, again, I used to get emails, you guys only report negative news. Nope. That's if that's all you're doing, then you're not doing your job. You're not. Our job is to tell, is to, as Walter Cronkite said, hold up the mirror and reflect that vision of the world. The issue is lots of times, I feel like many times when the story's bad, they really don't like what they see in the mirror. But I mean, again, and you also can't be afraid. Like if I was too afraid to tell a PIO, no, I know you don't, or someone, no, I don't. Then I've got an issue. I mean, and again, we have lawyers, especially if I know we have a bunch of gray employees on this tonight. We have wonderful First Amendment attorneys. If you aren't getting the information you need, then by all means, like if you're a gray employee, talk to your news director. If you are a news director on this call, call me, because at one point, Thomas, were we not I think we were in the number two in the company for the sheer number of letters that the attorneys were writing on behalf of.
We were up there. We were definitely up there.
Yeah, we were, as Ballard Spar would say, frequent flyers.
So a couple of questions for y'all. A couple of questions here. Beatrice wants to know, I can't even get how many vehicle accidents occurred during phase 1 of a construction project from the police department's PIO.
Well, my response to that would be, well, okay, so if they can't tell you, how do we, is there a different way to ask? Like if the police department can't give you the number of accidents, can we get the number of, can we get a copy of the police reports or accident reports from that? Turn that question into a FOIA request and see what happens from there. And then why? Let's just start peeling back. Investigative reporting is completely about peeling back the layers on a story and working forward through that. So, if we can't find out from the police department PI, I mean, if they can't tell you how many accidents, why can't they give you all the traffic reports from this time to this time in this area, and you compile the data yourself?
And then something to keep in mind too, if you're struggling to get an answer, let's say from the police department, is there someone else you can ask? Can you ask the county how many, how many times has EMS responded to this particular road? And that can give you an idea. So kind of going in a roundabout way of not going through that agency, but is there another agency that could be involved?
Never forget the wonderful trifecta of things that you can ask for when an incident happens. I used to have a checklist that I would keep about a big story response sheet. Always request the 911 calls from an area, the calls for service. That EMS was a great call, but I mean, if police were called to this area with a construction site, how many calls did they have for there? Just think of the different places you can get the data. Because I know with that Gather story in particular, while the personnel record came from the Charleston County School District, there were police reports that came from the Charleston County was it Charleston County Police? No, maybe in the sheriff's office, even the police or the sheriff. And then we would have just every agent you can think of that might have the documents that you need.
So would you agree, disagree? If they go to all these, take all these actions and still can't get a response, that may be the story.
Lawyer up. Okay, so here, there's a beautiful thing about Gray. When after I've gone as far as I can with dealing with calling the PIO's boss, listen, why can't you get this? If I feel like you are truly acting out of line with the law, then that's when I call up our good friends at the First Amendment attorneys, and they'll look at it and be like, okay, well, can you here's some other, again, this is a gray employee, this needs to go through your news director, but I was a news director, so I can talk about it. You can talk about what you can do, what you can find, and they'll usually call up the attorney for whatever public agency and talk about that. And then the next step usually is they'll write, them a letter, an official letter coming from our attorneys. And then when that's all done, sometimes you sue. Thomas, you guys recently sued the Charleston County Sheriff's Office and won.
We did. I was going to mention that. So there was an accident, it was over a year ago now on Folly Beach, where a A woman was accused of driving drunk and crashed into a golf cart and killed a bride who had just got married that night. That was on her way home from her wedding reception. So the Jamie Komorowski was the suspect's name. She was arrested and charged, and we had requested jailhouse calls from the jail, which is run by the sheriff's office in Charleston County. They were released previously to one agency here in town, and then we were denied them. And when we responded and asked why, we were told that they were releasing error to begin with, and they would not be releasing them to us. Well, long story short, we sued the sheriff's office, took them to court, had the full hearing between our lawyers, the sheriff's office lawyers, and a judge. And about 2 weeks later, a judge ruled in our favor that indeed these calls were public record, and the sheriff's office had to release them to us. So it took a while. But about a month later, we finally got all those calls. But that stemmed from a no that led to us questioning, that led to a lawsuit filed by Gray Media and Live 5 News that led to us getting those calls.
I mean, and and I heard someone at the very high levels of our company describe journalism as the air this company breathes. So, I mean, when you think about it in those lines, yes, do we want it come to that? To go to court to get no, we don't. It's expensive, and in that case, it ended up costing the taxpayers of Charleston County what $20,000-$30,000.
A lot, yeah. I mean, thousands and thousands.
I don't remember. I wasn't there. I just saw this story. I wasn't a part of it, but I mean, because when Live 5 won, they also won their legal fees being paid for. So I mean, that's taxpayer money. We don't want that anymore. Then we don't want our money going to paying legal fees because someone else isn't providing the documents. But sometimes you do that. Sometimes and we could have lost, and Live 5 would have had to eat that money paying attorneys fees. But again, it was pretty strongly felt like it was the right thing to do, and that sets that kind of a precedent. I mean, have you had trouble getting public records since then?
There's only one that we're actually currently involved in a lawsuit with the Colleton County Jail. Similar deal. It was a suspect that's accused of killing his family and setting the house on fire. And same thing. We requested these jailhouse calls. They were denied. The suspect himself is fighting it, and we're still involved. We still have not received those. That's been 7 or 8 months now, and we still have not received them. We may have a hearing probably in the next month or so. So it's a continued battle that we're fighting for these public records.
So, I mean, again, this is a little bit on the other side. I've been doing this a long time. 95, 99% of the time, you get the records that you are legally entitled to without having to go to court, in my experience. Now, you also may decide just because you want it doesn't mean that it actually is public records. I've gotten several that I really thought I should have that I lost. But it's a, it kind of, you win some, you lose some, but, I feel like the world's a better place because we have local television stations that's doing this type of journalism. And I'm really glad that we value this type of journalism in our company. We've gotten way off target with what we were talking about with contracts. So these are some headlines for some contracts. Just look at them. You want to see more, go to live5news.com and click on investigates. Now, this is our fifth FOIA. This is police training records. Most notably, this is used if something goes wrong. Not always, but many times when whenever there's an issue with police. Police training records. I know this is a world you've lived in a lot. Thomas, you want to talk about what you found in this?
Sure. So these training records are very similar to personnel records. Personnel files, though, pertain to that particular agency that someone is working for. Police training records give us an idea of a police officer or a sheriff deputy's entire career. So, we might have someone that maybe they've been put on leave because they're involved in an officer-involved shooting. So we can go for ourselves here in South Carolina. It's the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy. And we can email them and say, hey, can we request the training record for this officer most recently or currently with so-and-so police department? And they're going to respond to us and give us this training record. And what's it going to, it's going to show every single agency that that person has worked for. It's going to show the training that they've had and the dates that they've had it. So, you know, if they were trained with a taser, are they up to date on their training with their taser? And it's also going to show if they left an agency, did they leave voluntarily? Were they terminated? If they were terminated, the reasoning in the letter is going to be in that training history. So this really, really opens up a lot of background on officers. We talk a lot about digging deeper into stories and how can we go further than competition. You know, there might be a press conference where someone's put on leave, and that's something that every station is going to have. But this is going to allow us to go deeper and provide our viewers a wider story, a wider context of a certain officer.
Your Big Mac moment.
That's exactly right. It's the Big Mac moment.
You're going to use that phrase one day when you're a news director and you'll be like, that's Jennifer Dale right there, who, to be fair, I borrowed that. I learned that from a lovely, wonderful investigative, a former investigative reporter named Hollis Grizzard many years ago. So here's some headlines that may stem from a police training record story. Most notably is the one at the top, which is the case of Jamal Sutherland, which is probably the second largest. Well, I don't know if that's the first or the second largest story of my career in investigative, but Y5's investigation into that story ended up resulting in a $10 million settlement for wrongdoing. But using the training history of that, we uncovered all sorts of things to flush out that story. You know, many times, you know, the Charleston deputy charged and crashed, struggled behind the wheel in training. You know, like things that just take a story that everyone's covering up to the next level. All right, questions. I know that there's the chat looks like it's popping, and I really do love a good public records question, in case you can't tell.
Okay, here we go. How do you appeal a denied FOIA? Have you ever had to sue for records?
Okay, so appealing. Okay, there is some places have an appeal process. You need to look at your public records law, but generally, when I am denied a FOIA, depending on the agency, I'd be like, dude, really? Like, this is public record. Like, come on, like, let's not do this. Sometimes that works, but usually I would just go, like, if it's somebody I knew, like, okay, well, this is going to take a letter from the lawyers. And again, if you're a gray employee, talk with your news director, because we have a retainer so that our legal department can help us get those. And if you're not a gray employee, this is a recruiting call. So why don't you do something to help make sure you are, so then you can use our lawyers and get your public records.
I would throw out there too, just to keep in mind, something I don't think we've mentioned so far tonight. So the Freedom of Information Act, these documents and videos that you receive, they're not always free. Keep that in mind. So I would strongly urge, if you're going to file a Freedom of Information Act, include in there, if there is a fee for this, please let me know before fulfilling. The last thing you want to do is get this 100-page FOIA back, and all of a sudden your news director gets a bill for $500 or $1,000.
Please don't do that.
So yes, please don't do that. The best thing to do, and I may have just turned sideways. I don't know what just happened. All of a sudden, that's very, very strange. I will see if I can fix that in a second, but please keep your news director in the loop. And before you get charged for something, keep that in mind.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, if you had something.
I don't remember. I was going to say, and you know, and some of you may be questioning to like make that part of your FOIA request. If this is going to be more than $25, please let me know in advance. That's what I'd always just say. Hey, if there's a charge for this, let me know before you fill it so I can decide if it's worth it to me.
Is it possible to FOIA video surveillance of a public place?
Yes! Yes, it is. Yes, it is. If it comes from a city-owned camera, there is a fantastically interesting story from our station in New Orleans where they were got a tip that something was happening. Stephen knows the story I'm talking about.
Yes.
And
Great
that
story.
and that the mayor, the city owned an apartment in the French Quarter, so they requested surveillance video, and you'll just have to have to watch it
Yeah. It's a
in
good
order to
one.
see. But I think what was it, 40 something hours of surveillance video that they used to show what was happening at that apartment. Great story. But yes, surveillance video, if it's a city-owned camera, is public record.
And
I think
depending, speaking of video too, I was just going to say, body camera is not always public record. In the state of South Carolina, body camera is not, but a possible way around that. If you're looking to a story and there's a lawsuit, and you're speaking to the lawyer representing whoever is suing, ask that lawyer if they have the video that you're looking for. Oftentimes, through a subpoena, things like that, they may be able to have access to something that may not be FOIAble, but that doesn't mean that you can't get it. That lawyer may be able to give it to you, and that can be a workaround if you're looking for body camera that is denied under FOIA law.
And two, it also depends on your state. So while dash cam video is public record in South Carolina, body cam isn't. But I think in Ohio and Georgia, body cam is public record. So really that's some of that falls under your state public records laws, which makes some of these kind of things challenging when we're chatting. But it just really, you have to think of all the different ways to get it. If the first source isn't where you're going to get your video, where do I get it next? And source up. We're journalists. Get people to that's what we do. We have a million different ways to get things.
From someone who is yet to ever submit a FOIA, what is the best way to know which ones to request when?
Well, you just listen to 5 of them. So if whenever I get to a new place, this is where I always start. These are probably the 5 first public records that I've requested. And this is the 5 that will consistently probably, would you say, Thomas, consistently deliver the most for you?
I think so. Yeah. And I think if you've never submitted a FOIA, there's certain incidents that come out that you can kind of keep in mind to always FOIA something. If there's something with a police officer or a deputy that can fall under that training history or that personnel file, and it can be something, sometimes you can get it without FOIAing, but if there's a shooting or an incident, something like that, and you want to get the 911 calls, oftentimes you can just request them. To keep in mind, that's something that you can FOIA for 911 calls. You can FOIA for the amount of times, service and EMS and police have showed up. So there's certain things that happen almost every day that a FOIA may allow you to dive deeper into that story.
Yeah. And there's just, good places to start to learn. I would generally ask for my information first. And then when we can get it, that's when I'd be like, all right, well, here's I ask you nicely, here's my FOIA. So just think about that. You just have to determine who the record keeper is. And if you go online, there's various FOIA request generators that you can look at that can show you how to structure it. But generally, I would just most of the time, because I was a frequent FOIA flyer in Charleston. So after a while, all I'd have to be like, hey, under the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act, I'd like this. Let me know if there's a charge. I wouldn't have to state, code this, everything with that like I did when I first started. They know who we are now. Oh, another free FOIA idea is FOIA the FOIA log to see what everybody else is FOIA-ing. That's always interesting.
Is getting jailhouse calls through public record a state-specific thing? I haven't seen that in Illinois.
Yeah, I think that really came up through the Murdaugh hearings, didn't it?
I believe so. Yeah, there was Murdaugh. Once he was sentenced, I believe that was kind of the first time that those calls had come out. So when that story that I mentioned earlier on Folly Beach happened, that was the first time we've seen records from jail and things like that. But I think it may be state dependent. That would kind of vary depending on where you are.
And for those not familiar, the Murdaugh hearing is, if you guys remember, the attorney that was accused of killing his wife and son here in the Low Country that went national. So
Chris English asked, how do you request them?
FOIA. You need to determine your record holder. And then, you generally just Google whatever state you're in. So-and-so FOIA request. You'll find various websites that will show you how to build it. But I just usually, again, as a frequent flyer, hey, I'd like this under the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. And They got
Yeah,
used
I
to
would
it.
just,
At first, it'll
yeah,
be
normally
dramatic.
just, you just reach out to the PIO for whatever agency you're requesting. And it can be just like Jennifer said, as simple as, under the Freedom of Information Act, I'm requesting A, B, C, and D. If there's a charge, please let me know before fulfilling. And that should take care of you under the FOIA law.
Fallon wants to know, what about an autopsy report for a murder case? Would that be a public record?
I have
I
gotten
think it would
autopsy
vary.
reports for, but never. I don't know that I've ever gotten an autopsy report through FOIA. I don't think that's public. Have you, Thomas? I don't think we got any in South
I don't
Carolina.
think so, because that partly could get into HIPAA law and things can be
Yeah.
protected under HIPAA. I don't think so. We've seen them before, but I don't think it came from
Yeah,
FOIA.
usually those come through other sources rather than the government.
Jacqueline wants to know, is this the same for security guards who work for public places? I'm thinking
This is an interesting one. Like, so if the security guard is employed by the public agency itself, the personnel file would be public record if that is your state law. If they are contracted by an independent company, then they don't work for the state, they work for the company. The contract would be.
Where should young journalists start to get into investigative reporting?
Right here. Just get these 5 FOIAs.
Go to work start with these 5.
Please. Go to work at Live 5,
yeah, that'd be
or
great.
you go to Charleston, and Gray, go to Charleston, go to Augusta. We have a whole host of television stations that are pretty good at this kind of stuff.
Any advice for getting around state laws that limit or prohibit access to certain personnel records? How about records in general, Alabama? Just name dropping a state there.
I think Alabama has, like, God bless them, and that is my home state, has probably one of the worst open records laws I've ever seen. I think in a situation like that, you've got to get kind of creative with how you do it, because if you have an agency that doesn't want to give it to you and the law doesn't make them, well, so how do you get someone to do what you want them to do? There's a couple of different ways. I've always said the best way to get someone to do what you want them to do what you want them to do is have them want to do it. All right. So, so how do you get a public agency to want to give information? To show that it's in their best interest. If they're, let's say, South Carolina, the argument I'd always make with body cam is like, okay, so the body cam only shows that you guys were doing the right thing, right? Well, yeah. Why wouldn't you want to show that? Like, all of this stuff is happening. Why won't you show it? Okay, you've got records that show that this is right. Prove it. If you watch that Gather story, the Charleston County School District did not want to do that interview. What ended up happening is I talked with the PIO and I said, I understand you don't want to sit down and do an interview that's, where we can take time and answer these questions. I said, I get that. I guess we can ask our question at the board meeting and sign up for public comment. He sat down and did the interview.
How do you address submitting FOIAs if you're a freelancer?
It doesn't matter. You are a taxpayer. It doesn't matter if you are a freelancer, you're fully employed, or you're just some person who just wants to know. It's your right as an American.
Yep. And you'll notice, and Jennifer mentioned the FOIA logs that are FOIAble. And you'll notice, we've noticed in FOIA logs, you'll see anything from news agencies to, private detectives and private investigators to lawyers, anybody and everyone, no matter what their job is, or if they don't have a job, no matter what, you can submit a FOIA.
You'll see a lot of FOIA requests from the people who are at, like, city council meetings and school board meetings, the people who sign up for public comment and are really into whatever's happening, then you can usually get that. The good old part of a pending criminal investigation. Yes, it's likely to be denied, but you know what happens when that case is settled? Hey, Thomas, what happens when a case is settled and everything's ready to go? What can you request?
Everything. You can request the entire investigative file. And that will give you absolutely everything. I mean, with Murdoch, that was something that we requested, was State Police's investigative file. So while they could say no now, keep in mind, and I would stay on top of them, is it still a pending investigation? We have a story going on right now with an officer-involved shooting that has been a pending investigation now for 2.5 months. And I call them every week, and I ask, is it still pending? Is it still pending? And one day, they're going to say, no, it's closed. And then it's going to be fair game to access all of those records.
And so the way around a pending criminal investigation that you have is if the defense attorney, if the person who's accused already has a defense attorney, that defense attorney many times has access to more than you can. They can give you that information. Like call up the defense attorney and say, "Hey, tell me what you see," because like again, as we'd say back home, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
How do you get info from a private entity?
We'll start by asking if they won't give it to you. Again, the best way to get someone to do what you want them to do is to have them want to do it. So you want to think about why it's in their benefit to give you the information you're requesting.
Right. And just keep in mind, though, if that a private entity does not fall under everything we've talked about tonight as far as the law. We've had people submit FOIAs to Live 5 and saying, under Freedom of Information Act, I want this, this, and this from Live 5. Doesn't quite work that way. But if you're trying to get information from a private entity, like Jennifer said, just ask. Try to start there. There's not as much that you can do, though, if they say no. You have to kind of get creative in that aspect rather than falling back on the law.
Jamie Birch, is this the Jamie Birch that I know? If it is, you can just call me. I'll walk you through these 5 FOIAs personally. If it isn't, yes, there'll be a playback. And man, who knew there was this many Jamie Birches in television? But yeah, this playback, it'll be available on YouTube. Thomas and I actually shot a version earlier, but I think I like this version better, Thomas, because we've got so many wonderful questions.
I think this one went better.
So we'll post that one too. In true belief that I can sit here and talk FOIA all night. We're past time, but I'm still going to answer these questions. Are prison files from a felon subject to FOIA? Well, the answer is it depends on what you're looking for. Thomas, what sort of files have you gotten from a prison? I know we've gotten some, and I remember some, but I think you do too because we worked on the story together.
I think so. I'm trying to think of what would come from a prison. The badge swipes are fair game from a prison. That was kind of shit with that Jay McCroskey story. There was concerns about the sheriff giving preferential treatment. So we were able to request badge swipes that showed exactly who was going in and out of the suspect cell. So badge swipes are fair game. We mentioned, prison calls are fair game. Here, at least in Charleston, I think a lot of other places too, inmates have iPads that they can go through. That's FOIAble. You can see what people are doing on their iPads while they're in jail. Jennifer, which one are you referring to?
I was thinking some of the early ones because you can see kind of where they've been. Like if you pull up their like prison like transfer record, you can see if they've gotten into trouble in prison. Yep. We did a story years ago about a man who had just gotten out on parole, and when we pulled his I can't remember the exact name of the record, the prison record. We were able to see his that like a few months before he got out on parole, he'd gotten in trouble for like stabbing. So I mean, you can see that. You can see if they've been transferred. You can see if they've been punished for some reason and why they were punished. You can even see if someone puts money in their account for like the prison. Is it called the commissary? Is that what it's called?
The canteen
there?
The canteen.
I was fixing to ask you that question. I was curious about that.
Yeah. So you can see that. I know in South Carolina, again, I would think it would be others, but that in South Carolina, that's actually available online. So, you can look up right now and see.
2 more things. This one's for you, Jennifer. Don't forget Columbia.
Who could possibly forget WIS in Columbia? There's no way. And look, it is Talia. Look at the top. We know her.
Hey.
I want to request real estate reports. Do I request the same way?
Talia, shoot me an email and tell me what you're trying to request, and I'll let you know. I haven't requested a ton of real estate. Thomas, have you?
I can't say that I have. The only thing, and I don't know if this is exactly what you're looking for, Talia, but what, if you're curious about what is being built or something like that, you can you request, from the city or the county, records or emails even, and see who they're talking to. That kind of gets a little deep in the weeds. I don't know if that would help with what you're looking for. But I don't think I've ever gotten exact real
Yeah,
estate
it depends on what
reports.
you're looking for. Like, I wanted to know, like, with some of the development, because Charleston's growing so fast, like all the applications for permits, but I found them very hard to read. And I never successfully cracked that particular code. But man, I tried. I tried,
Yes.
but these I found for especially for beginners, and you'll find that usually one just leads to the next. These one public record will lead to the next one, and then you'll get this. And if you really consistently are requesting your public records, you'll generally have something ready to go, and you won't be, as an MMJ, you will not be as stressed out about what am I going to cover tomorrow. The best feeling in the entire world is when, let's say you have to work a holiday, right? It stinks. Nothing's going on when you work a holiday. There are no lead stories unless there's some terrible, terrible, terrible tragedy, which you never want. But if you have your FOIAs and you're going ahead of time while everybody else is all chasing some really boring story, you possibly have a hard news lead ready to go. If you're doing this well, like the whole goal is to have better stories for our viewers, but it also makes it less stressful. I used to come in on Friday mornings and work the morning show at Live 5, watch the morning show, spend time with my morning producers, and FOIA Friday. We called it the FOIA Friday shift. And I would request just what you're seeing here. And other things, you'll learn this as you go through. You'll see one document, you're like, wow, this is cool, I want to know more about this. But you can't do it unless you never start. So FOIA early, FOIA often. And if you want to, and I'll just say straight up, like, this is not the best of the training that Gray has to offer. I think this is good, and I hope it was useful to you. But I mean, Gray is phenomenal when it comes to teaching young journalists how to be better journalists. And I always tell people that they actually pay me to be the VP of recruiting. This journalism part is what I'm passionate about. And so I guess I'm doing this for free because I'm not an hourly employee. So so this is coming out in the evening, but we want to make sure that if you are interested in learning more about this or working with us, my passion is taking young journalists and helping them become forces in the investigative world. And I know that that's something Thomas is very, very good at as well. So we'll help you any way we can. And now, since we have a captive audience of 37, Thomas, what openings do y'all have at Live 5? Not to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. We have a digital content producer opening that we are searching for.
Oh, wait, what happened to the last digital content producer?
Hey, look at that. They were promoted to our investigative producer role.
Okay, yeah. All right. Sorry, I thought. I did not remember that when I asked you what openings you had, but
I was that works very well. It was a great segue. But to be honest, I believe we've got that, and that might be it at the moment, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, I think it is. And Thomas is an example of what a wonderful young employee can do within Gray. When I met Thomas 6 years ago, he was a producer at Live 5. And I think how long we worked together, maybe top 6 months before you moved into management.
I believe so. Yeah,
like at most. And so he spent the next 4 years or so as our assignment manager. And whenever I moved to work for corporate, our assistant news director, Jim Martin, moved to be the news director, and Thomas became our assistant news director. And he's currently in our advanced leadership class. Thomas is going to be a news director one day. If that right there doesn't show you the journey you can take if you are a young person from producer, or actually before that, you worked at IS, right? In production? I don't know if it's just me that's held up or not.
I think.
Oh, his phone just died. He texted me. He just texted me. Okay, I'll answer the question for him. Thomas worked in production at IS before coming here. So, you know, I'm going to remove him because that looks very unfortunate with him stuck that way. So I guess we've killed Thomas's phone. So that's he says he was a production assistant at 5 months at WIS. So, I mean, he truly worked his way up within this company. If this is something you're interested in doing or learning more about, feel free to shoot me an email, shoot Stephen an email. We're going to put our email address right up here. And please join us. We will be back next month with another webinar. It's going to be from college to career. For those of you watching live, you can register on grayishiring.com. And just thank you so much for joining us and letting me talk about something I am so passionate about, which is investigative reporting. I think I'm going to go FOIA something now. Call me, gray people, call me if you need me. Non-gray people, call me and we'll get you a job. Talk soon. Bye.